Hey, OGs, nice to see you.
Hi,
Good to see
Sass.
you, Sass.
Episode 3.
I
I
can't even
know.
believe it.
I know. And I shared with you guys on our WhatsApp chat group that we had 100 downloads so far of the podcast.
I
So
know. We're like hundred errors.
we're
Okay, so I
Hundred
was
hundred.
of
I, I was
people.
actually meaning to message you back and say, so is that good? Because I have no idea.
I think it's
It's good.
great.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
I
I mean, it
just
sounds
try
good
and
to
picture
me.
100 people listening
I
in, like
know.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it is
know.
good. That is cool.
Yeah,
That's
it's
very
fun to share
cool.
that kind of stuff, right? Yeah.
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 Yeah. And the
And
comments
I'm
coming
glad
in.
people.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I feel like people are, and we're all getting messages and
Yeah.
coming. And what would you like us to talk about? What questions do you have? Where do you disagree or agree? Like we want to hear all of it. So thanks. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not only people are listening, but I'm so grateful that they're engaged as well. So
Totally.
yeah,
Yeah.
And is
yeah.
this where
That's
we say
been,
like, and share it with your friends?
Oh,
If
yes,
you haven't done that
yes.
already, like
Like,
who
follow,
else
share,
might like it?
all that
Yeah.
yeah,
jazz. Maybe that's why
all the
we're not
jazz.
the we're not the coach influencers.
Well,
Help us
I'm
sisters
just
out.
help the sisters out. Yeah. If you love it, tell some people that might love it too. Basically, I think that's how it works. All good. All good.
Yes.
So episode 3, we want to kind of, because we're finding our groove with this, and what we've decided is we're going to each kind of introduce and lead a session, an episode. It's not a session. It feels like it sometimes. An episode, and that's feeling really organic for us. It's really cool. So we hope you enjoy that and you get to know each of us a little more, I guess. What we wanted to talk about today is making money from coaching and have a really kind of open, transparent conversation about this. And I just want to preface this by saying, like the International Coaching Federation survey, they do this every couple of years. The average salary of a coach has stayed around about 75K US for the last decade. So I don't know if that helps anyone listening, but I just want us to have a nice, healthy barometer for what we're talking about here. More lucrative areas of coaching tend to be in the executive and leadership space, usually because that's where organizations are paying. And for those of us who we coach the muggles, right? We tend to be life coaches. I personally want us collectively to have a much healthier, more mature approach to our incomes in this industry. I think there's some really ludicrous claims and behaviors around money in coaching, lots of magical thinking, right? And I guess, that reflects the culture we're in. Particularly I think in the States and Australia, there is this kind of real value of wealth, more is better. And I kind of despair a bit at how we tend to respond to it. It really fosters unhealthy comparisons. I've worked with so many really committed, thoughtful coaches who make themselves wrong for not hitting some arbitrary number.
Oh,
So I really want us to talk about this. I want to us to talk a bit about how we choose to run our practices, and that is really what determines the kind of income you have. And because the three of us do this quite differently, right? We each have quite different models for how we run our practices. We thought we would share like how we make our money. And our hope is that it really inspires folks who are watching or listening to kind of just come back and check in with yourself. Like, what choices are you making that feel really aligned to you? What does enough feel like to you? And start to sort of maybe pull away from those external influences that you may just find a bit unhelpful and maybe sparking some, quite, yeah, just not very kind responses to yourself and how you're running your own work. So yeah, that's where we're at today. If that sounds good to you, keep on listening. Bridget, do you want to kick us off with like what's the business model you're using? What does that look like in your world?
yeah, I'm happy to. And what I want to say, but before I get into that, is this whole idea of money and what it means to you. I think the whole allure of the 6 and 7 figures, I think you nailed it with the kind of hyper capitalistic idea. And I think some people conflate the idea of money with freedom, with meaning, with purpose, with fulfillment. I think there's a lot of other stuff that money becomes a poor substitute for. And I've had times in my career where I've made a lot of money and just been terrified of losing it all, and then pretty much did, and actually found a lot of freedom and spaciousness in that. I'm not recommending that as a pathway to people, but what I'm saying is that I followed that path and it didn't give me what I thought it was going to give me because I didn't deal with the underlying issues around money and my life and how I wanted it to be. So I just want to put that out there, is that I think there are these easy promises of money, and that you're going to be this fabulous person and it's going to solve all these problems, and that doesn't happen. And so I think that's the other thing that people run into, is even if you do get on the hamster wheel and you follow the path, you're and I've coached a lot of those people, and they're saying, is that all there is? And in a way there is. Money making without some kind of underpinning of meaning is just a kind of a hamster wheel that you're on.
Yeah, it's
And
it's a pretty
yes,
hollow victory, right? Like,
it really
yeah,
is. And I think that, the idea of money is, it's such a place where people are vulnerable, and then there's this idea that it's going to be easy to go from what you were doing to building a business. And there's also two different things happening here. There's learning to become a coach, and then there's potentially building a business. And those are two separate skill sets. And I think it's really helpful for people to think about that too. Maybe I'm in love with being a coach, but I'm not in love with the idea of being an entrepreneur. And there's absolutely career paths for you, but that's another place where I've seen people fall into the allure of sort
yeah.
of the easy career switch and the money, not really realizing like, oh, this is a twice over new endeavor. I have to learn a new skill set and I have to learn how to start a business. So it's just
Yeah.
good to know what you're doing going in. These are the kinds of things that I don't know, because it's also like, I haven't had a baby, but it's also kind of like having a baby. If I would have known what it took going into it, I might have never done it.
Yeah.
But here I am. So
It
yeah,
is really
so
like what you're saying, Bridget, just really reminds me that we're doing two very complex things.
yes,
And then we're like, oh, there's a hell of a lot of self-doubt coming up. Maybe I can't do this, or, whatever. And I would just say, that is to be expected. That makes sense. Like, you don't have to make yourself wrong because that those two very complex endeavors are creating a sense of, oh, I'm not really sure what the hell I'm doing. Like, I think everyone feels like that. I think running a business, particularly in the helping professions, it's the self-development journey you never expected that you were signing up for. It's gonna
exactly.
like push on all your edges.
Well, this is where I feel like I'm a little bit, we talked about how we have different modes. So I feel like I'm a little bit different perspective than the two of you, because I was clear from the very beginning, not interested in having a business, not interested in having a business, interested in having a coaching practice, but business, no. So that, I didn't like managing people. When I was a teacher librarian beforehand, I had library clerks under me, didn't enjoy it. I was really looking for, what does wealth look like to me, might be a way to phrase it. And it wasn't about money necessarily. It was about a little bit more spaciousness in my life, time-wise. And it was definitely about not having things be simplifying my life, not getting it more complicated. So I think my path was different than the two of you, in that I was much more gradual, probably. I know I'm interested to hear from the two of you when you describe how it happened for you. But I was very gradual. I actually didn't find it that terribly onerous because it was gradual. And it was very organic. The growth was very organic and manageable for me. And because I never saw it as a business, I didn't go very much down the rabbit hole of marketing or, branding. I never had a photo shoot. I didn't really do any of those businessy
God
things.
bless you.
So I'm just saying it doesn't have to. That I think that warning is a really good warning that you gave, Bridget,
Yeah.
because that is what is generally sold to us, is that it's going to be this easy business that we're going to start, and then it's going to take off. And I'm just giving a little bit of a different angle to that. It's like it doesn't actually have to be like that.
Yeah.
So that was,
I love that
that's
so
just from
much.
my experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I'm so happy we're having this conversation. So anyway, I derailed off the question that you had asked me, Sass. Unusual for me. But yeah, I bought the hype. I launched in full bore. I was gonna switch careers. I was done with my corporate marketing career. I trained to be a coach, and they told me if I did these things, I would build this business or this practice. And so I set about doing that. And I didn't give myself that space. That's the main thing I coach my service provider clients on, is like, give yourself enough space. So I think that's sort of one of the big myths or lies that people say, is like, oh, you're going to be making 6 figures in 6 months or whatever. And I think that's pretty rare, and that somebody can do that. And probably they're bringing some kind of beefy skill set over with them, and then have some kind of amazing ability to stay out of their own way. Because like you were saying, Sass, I think it's such an internal and external process. So I found it really challenging, and I needed to make a living. So I also put a ton of pressure on my business out of the gate, because it was like, okay, I have some savings, but I need to start making a living at this. And that was incredibly challenging. I would not recommend it, because that pressure colored the decisions that I made in my business, and everything was kind of live and die. And really the attitude I think you need is one of experimentation, because you're learning to become a coach. And if you want to create a business, or even just as a coach, you're also figuring out, like, what's my ideal expression as a coach? Do I want to work one-on-one? Do I want to have groups? Whatever.
Mhm.
So I did set about doing that. And I mean, I've experimented with everything. I've done one-on-one, I've done every kind of group you can imagine. I've done retreats, I've done small retreats, I've done big retreats, I've been a part of, I've taken people overseas on safari. I've done memberships. I've done a lot. I've created a couple products here and there.
You're
And
like the queen of experimentation.
yeah, but yes. And I think my Achilles heel in that I'm still coming to grips with even now is, so like you were saying, this is always, it's a personal growth path too. So the pattern that I've seen is, like, when I think things aren't working, then I reinvent, so
Right.
like reinventing too quickly and not just staying with something. And literally this morning, my partner was reminding me of that. So it's like, I don't know that our patterns ever change. We just get to know ourselves better. And at least that's my experience. I get to know myself better and work with it better. So let's see. Where I've landed from all that experimentation is, I decided I needed to focus, but what focus looks like for me is a variety of things, because I also know that I'm multi-passionate.
Mhm.
And so whenever I tried to niche down into one thing, like, that didn't work either. So where I've landed is, I have 3 lanes of business, which I don't know that I would recommend to anybody else, but I like to do all these things. I do business consulting. So I work with all kinds of businesses, from Fortune 500 businesses to like a bakery in Toronto to, a marketing services agency, just all kinds of businesses. And I do a combination of executive coaching and just kind of helping them figure out what's going on in their business and fixing it. That's kind of the underlying theme of my stuff, is like, what's going wrong here? And let's see if we can't get it going in the right direction. So I do that for businesses. I do it for coaches and service providers. And then I have my sort of retail work with my client, my normie client work, which is my mosaic work, which is all about figuring out what's next in life, primarily focused at midlife and beyond. And I do one-on-one coaching and I run groups. I'm really passionate about running groups and building community. And so that's always a big component of what I do. But yeah, I just think that's the thing, is like everybody has to find their thing, and that takes a while. It takes a while because you're also getting to know yourself in the process.
Love that so much, Bridge. Yeah.
I'm
Really
so
cool.
I do, I so appreciate that we have such a breadth of experience. Like, I feel like you and I are kind of almost, opposite ends of the continuum, because you just have like all this business and so many, like you said, like products and memberships and all the things. And I have none of that, so that's so great that you can, really draw from that and help so many people. It's wonderful. It's really, really great. What about you, Sass?
So I'm much like Bridget, but probably a bit in the middle between us in terms of where I've got to. I'm totally with you, Bridget, on putting quite a lot of pressure on myself at the start. When I trained as a coach, it was because I was coming out of a really bad burnout, and I actually volunteered for redundancy and taken quite a few months to really figure out what the hell am I doing, and decided to retrain in coaching, and figured out pretty quickly, I think this is the work I'm supposed to do. This felt very much like coming home to me. It was kind of love at first sight. And just to carry on that metaphor, I did feel like I was having this hot affair with coaching, but I had this quite dull marriage to my day job. And I did that for about 3 years because I was so desperate to leave my corporate work. It was very much golden handcuffs. So I was paid quite a lot of money. It gave us an enormous amount of freedom and choices in our life. We were living in London at the time, which I don't know if you've heard is quite expensive. And it just felt like I didn't know anyone who was self-employed. It wasn't really a model that I could sort of see. And it was actually through blogging that I even came to coaching. I was a very old school blogger, and this was way before anything was monetized on the internet. Like, we was just talking to each other. It was magical. That process kind of gave me the courage to sort of find my voice a bit and what I liked, and find an identity outside of work, which had always been my thing. And that led me into coaching. I started off with, a website that I got designed and I was so freaking proud of, and it had a little cartoon version of me, and I called myself a life transformer, and I had a little robot icon. It was just super fun. It felt
so adorable.
It was adorable, and it was so playful, and I think that's what coaching's always been to me. So I wanted my business to feel, I never wanted to bring in to the way I worked, all the crappy, inhumane stuff that I had seen go on in, big organizations. And so I think I've resisted getting organized for quite a long time. I really wanted to just play. That it was like, I really want this to be amazing forever, And of course, as happens with every romance, you start to get to know each other, and it's like some of the magic and the shine can, dull a little. So I found, I really need to get good at marketing. I need to, mostly for me, it's been an ongoing lesson in receiving. I'm really good at taking care of other people. I love doing that. There is a concept in the Māori language which is all about hosting. and caring for people and welcoming folks in, and it's food and flowers and gifts and hugs, and that sense for me has always felt very innate. And I think I've tipped that over at times in my business where I've been good at the giving and not great at the receiving. So it's been really tricky for me to figure out things like pricing and the value of this work. I can still remember receiving my very first PayPal receipt, and this was in the first few months of PayPal's existence. It's magical to me that you could receive a payment online, and it was for £25 for a session. And I just cried my eyes out. I couldn't believe someone had paid me to have this conversation with them, and they'd walked away going, that was so helpful. It was like, what even is this? This can't possibly be a job, you know? So as you can probably tell, I was deeply in love with the coaching process. I found the business of it a real struggle. So I think that sort of gave me an approach that I would probably describe as scattergun. I was like, right, I've got to do all the things, because one thing is not going to be enough. So I had a group program. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Coaching with a group is very different from coaching with one-to-one.
Yes.
And I don't think we are trained to hold groups when we go through most of our practitioner training. So I really didn't know what I was doing, but I kind of knew how to run a workshop because I'd done that for years in my organizational career, corporate career. So I flummoxed my way through group stuff, always had one-to-one as a practice, really started to get excited about working with folks who had self-doubt, and that ended up becoming my master's dissertation because I did 2 practitioner coach trainings, and then I went and did a master's degree in coaching, because part of my kind of healing, I guess, is not just about receiving, but trusting that I'm enough. So you can see, right, the themes of worthiness have been a big old part of this process. As I specialized, I found it much easier to talk about the work I did and how I helped. I went in quite deep with it, and that felt really safe for me. I can be an expert in this thing, and that sense of expertise gave me a real feeling of legitimacy, I think. And it was also my lived experience, so I was very comfortable, because of those years of blogging, to kind of share my own story. Like, it didn't seem like a big leap to me. There wasn't much kind of tension around that for me. So I felt like I was bringing my whole self in, the academic side of me, the researcher side of me, the person who loved being kind of the Princess Sparkle Pony of my own circus. Like, I just have that in me. I've always been called like bossy. And now I'm like, no, I'm really good at leading at the front of the room. And I hope I do it in a way that allows folks to feel like they're safe to be there too. But that has felt like it's really been legitimized through my work. So all to say, for me, the wealth stuff, like what does abundant, if I can use the A word, what does abundant feel like to me? You know, it has really been about, can I bring my whole self in? Can I have enough freedom to think big thoughts and be inspired and creative in my work?
Mm-hmm.
Can I have a sense of purpose, and like my work really is meaningful to me? Does it matter to me? Have I got enough money for books and the good cheese? You know, like I don't think I've ever been really motivated by money, but I've had it as a barometer of how good or how successful I am. I've definitely found in the last 5, maybe 8 years, I'm really unhooking from that. Like, I feel like I've been through my own like education around what money actually is, and the external systems that we're all kind of part of, and what I want to contribute to, what I value. And so getting to a place of what does enoughness mean to me has been so liberating, because I'm now not seduced by the quick fix promise and the 5-step method promise. I'm much more discerning, because I'm always coming back to, why might I be attracted to this? You know, and usually it's late at night and I'm hungry and tired or something, you know, like that. It's like, that's never a good place to make a decision from. So where I've got to now, my practice is I do a lot of work around self-doubt with the Muggles. So I have one program which is called Self-Belief School, and that is about healing the root causes of self-doubt. And We have a kind of library of videos that folks can go in and play with, and there's like a journal that they can just get printed off, and it's about 100 pages, and it kind of takes them through all of the tools and the self-coaching approaches. And I run like 3 times a month, I run a coaching session, maybe do a workshop every now and then. And once a year, we run the program live. So we go through the whole set of videos together, kind of thing. And that's great. This, you know, that's been running for a few years now. Got about 100 people in it. People kind of come and go. It's a kind of pay once, get lifetime access type deal. So it means that you can kind of go through this a few times. It's always there. It's a kind of endless invitation. The work I'm really excited about at the moment is supervision for coaches. So I trained as a supervisor a couple of years ago, and this is something that is emerging in our industry, which I'm excited about, which is where we can talk about the craft of coaching. You know, what are the dilemmas and dynamics that are playing out between us and our clients? Having a place to go and figure that stuff out and talk about it with someone is so helpful. I've had supervision for over a decade, and it has made such a massive difference to me. So I'm really excited about that, and I do that in very small groups, so no more than 6 people. We work together for a year. People can re-up if they want to. And I also have a couple, very small number of one-to-one clients that I work with, mostly because I just love that work. It feels like the real rich stuff can happen in those smaller groups. Right now, I'm just running for the last time for at least a few years, the Self-Belief Coaching Academy, which is where I train coaches in my methodology to help folks heal their self-doubt. And I've been running that for 5 years. I've trained over 100 coaches. I've realized that I don't love teaching the same stuff over and over. So I'm starting to sort of lose my passion a bit for that. So I thought, oh, I'm just going to pause on that for a bit. It's not forever, but definitely for a couple of years. And yeah, and the way I run my business is I have a VA, a business manager, which does about maybe 20 hours a month and kind of keeps things ticking over. I have a couple of support coaches that I bring in from time to time when things are busy. It's a pretty lean machine. I don't love managing people either. I've worked with business coaches in the past who are like, right, success equals big. So you need to start employing more people, and then you need to make more money to pay for them. And you kind of end up in the treadmill where you're not even doing the fun stuff anymore, you know? So I'm now kind of moving towards a practice that is much more about intimacy. I'm feeling really pulled to that. I'm curious to know if I can replicate in some way the model that I have for supervision, if I can do that with folks who aren't coaches. What would that look like to have that space to talk about, you know, to really more sort of small circle work? That feels quite exciting to me right now. So it's been an ever-changing feast. I think the thing I'm learning as I keep doing this, and it's been nearly 15 years now, is it's never going to be static, because this is an expression of me. My business isn't me, but it is an expression of me. The more I know, the more I play with and, you know, kind of heal stuff in myself, my business is going to reflect that. So there is, for me, I don't try to get too attached to anything. I can get quite excited about things, but I've learned to really slow down, give things a chance to breathe, you know, really do what it takes to take it out into the world and see what people, you know, whether they resonate with it, and really trust that sometimes I'm going to need some space in between ideas. I don't have to be constantly inspired, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow, that's great. And I'm just getting ideas as I'm listening to both of you. Leanne, I was curious, like, who are your clients?
Well, yeah, I'm
And
here to answer the question for those who may be listening.
yeah.
Can I support myself with a one-on-one only coaching practice?
Yeah.
And I would say yes, and give yourself lots of runway. So I was just talking to somebody that I was giving in a mentoring conversation with yesterday. And I started coaching in 2006, the fall of 2006. So it's going to be 18 years coming up this fall. And I was coaching alongside my teaching. I think I mentioned on one of our previous conversations, I'm very risk averse. So I'm not one to quit my job and say, okay, I'm going to be a coach now. I would wake up in the morning at 6 a.m. and coach people. I'm on the West Coast. I would coach people on the East Coast. It was 9 o'clock their time. I would go teach a full day of school. I would come home at 4 p.m., 5 p.m. my time and coach somebody in the Southern Hemisphere or in Korea, or, I coach people from all over. So at the beginning, I was just bookending it on my full-time teaching job. And then as the coaching built up, the one-on-one coaching, and I got more and more clients through, word of mouth or the very limited marketing efforts that I did to kind of get myself a little bit more visible. I started going part-time. Like I would reduce my teaching time by this, by a quarter, by a half, till at the very end, which was it wasn't until 2015 that I fully resigned from my teaching job. And at the end, I was teaching one psychology 12 class for one semester of the year. So it was a very tiny amount of teaching, but I was still doing it. And so that was 9 years basically of runway that I had from starting in 2006 to June 2015. That was what, my trajectory was before I coaching replaced my teaching income. And so, yes, I want to say, yes, 100% you can do it. Now, of course, the three of us also are not mothers.
That's right.
And, our circumstances are maybe different than some other people out there. And those are other considerations that have to be thought of too, is like, what are my other commitments in life? Now, for me, I started coaching when I was 40. I'm turning 58 this summer. So that's my 18 years, right? And 40 I had finished my master's degree. It was kind of like it was a good timing for me in terms of my life trajectory.
Yeah.
I do have a bias. I will admit that I think coaches who are, past their 20s and into their, I have a bias for coaches that are at least in their late 30s,
Yeah.
like that's my own bias. I think you need some life experience. So for me, it was a good time in my life to start coaching, and it's been a good trajectory and I've loved it. And it hasn't felt, this was the thing, coaching found me. I didn't find coaching. Like it started because my administrator at the school I was teaching at asked me if I would coach my colleagues. And I was like, you mean like Dr. Phil? Like that was my only idea about coaching was Dr.
You
Phil.
can't change what you don't acknowledge.
And I was like, I really
How's that
don't.
working for you?
Yeah. Right. And I totally didn't resonate with any of that. So, but I, got some training and fell in love with coaching and thought, oh yeah, this is good. I really want to see what I can, I wanted to do it that so much that I just did it alongside the teaching to start and really didn't know what would happen and just kind of followed the unfolding of it. So and I think that's, we talked about that New York Times article last time. And I think, Bridget, you're highlighting in your experience there how if you do it from that place of, I'm so desperate to get out of this toxic place I'm in, and then you do the big leap, which is what is like, I understand why people do that because it's really what's sold. It is really what is being sold out there is take the big leap and you're going to make the money. But then you end up in that place of desperation. And that's I think that's a really hard place to build a business from. If you are building a business like you two, or even a practice in my case. And we know that statistically, even though so much of the, entrepreneurial world or startup world or whatever it is about taking those big leaps, when we actually look at the statistics, it's the people who do it as a side hustle who are way more successful than the people who take a big leap.
Yeah.
And
So,
that same ICF survey that I mentioned at the start, what I've noticed from reading that every time it comes out is that the majority of coaches, and this is I mean, it's a barometer, it's a pretty rudimentary one, but the majority of coaches that complete that survey have less than 3 years experience.
oh, wow.
What that tells me is that if after a few years you haven't found a way to make an income from this work, you will probably take your coaching skills into an employment situation, which is a fantastic way of doing that. I mean, my goodness, can you imagine if all our leaders had some self-reflection skills and the ability to ask good
Yeah.
questions?
Yeah.
That's the thing. And when I was training coaches, I talked all the time about coaching and the whole idea was, what are you going to combine your other gifts and passions with? How
Yeah.
else what situations could you put yourself in and bring the coaching skills to? Because I saw, I saw that struggle and I wanted to do what I could within the framework I was in to steer people in more sustainable directions.
Mm.
And I always get really excited when I hear people combining, some other element, whether it's going into a workplace or
Mhm.
even another kind of business, but they're taking these
Yeah.
skills that they've learned into just being a great leader or, a facilitator or whatever it is. I like to think of coaching as this, yes, it's a profession, but even deeper than that, it's a toolkit that we have and an orientation to life that you can take into any situation. So it always breaks my heart when there's such a binary between I'm a coach or I'm not a coach, or I made it or I didn't make it. Are you drawing air? Are you with
Mm.
us? You made it. You're making it and you're finding your way, and the skills that you've learned about how to work with yourself and others in that context are always going to be relevant in it. And I think people too think that they don't get to belong to the community because they took a job or they did this or they did that or
Mm.
they didn't succeed or whatever. And I just want to say bullshit. Like,
Yeah.
you get to be a part of this community, in whatever way works for you. And look, I realize like I would be remiss if I didn't say like I've had a couple jobs along the way because those were just opportunities that presented themselves. I ran a coaching company, and then when that was just a complete shit show, I left that. And I realized that I wasn't in a place where I could be sort of out in the world as a coach, energetically, not in a look at me kind of way, but just in an energy of being able to hold space for other people.
Mm.
And the way that I know how to do it is kind of by putting myself out there. And I just realized like I felt way too vulnerable. And so I took another job. I took a marketing job at a spiritual publisher. And, that was like a whole other bundle of life lessons and clarity, but I want to add those things in because I want people to have a complete picture of of my path. And what that ended up resulting in is I sort of thought of having my coaching business all along because I've always been a coach. I've always been coaching. I've always had one-on-one clients, at least here and there. I've always had groups, but really, after those two working job experiences, I had to rebuild my coaching business and the world had changed. And so it sort of took me a while to figure that out too. And that this was
Mm.
a whole different environment and I was different. And
Mm.
so, yeah, I just feel like it's important to be like it is as transparent as we can be about our paths and experiences so people can get a more of a complete picture. And,
Yeah.
I really want to encourage people. So if you did jump off and take a job because you needed to pay the bills or whatever, like there's no shame in that. I just don't want people to feel ashamed or like they failed or that they sucked at it because they believed some promises that are really not possible to live up to. And I feel like if one person can walk away from listening to this podcast and saying like, oh, I get it, I'm okay, I'm doing great, I'm following my path, and I always feel like the path just continues to unfold. There's
Mhm.
no in or out.
Yeah, and I would like to add a little to that, Bridget, because I also want to kind of inject a little like positive vision here that the three of us are doing this because
Mm.
we want to elevate the profession. And I think as the profession gets a better reputation, as which I think, I think that is happening. I think this reckoning is actually part of that. And I think, and I would add to that another thing that I personally think that coaching is going to become more sought after as people want to spend their discretionary income in less material ways
Mm.
because of what's happening to our environment, because of all the considerations of that, just because of people realizing, I think, what's actually adds value to their life and enriches their life. So I also want to leave with kind of on a positive note that I think the potential of coaching as a whole is unfolding.
Yeah.
Bridget said
Yeah.
like watching where things unfold, but I would like to think that there's lots of potential for coaching out there. And as SAS supervises people, as Bridget mentors people, I'm going to start mentoring people soon. We're hopefully creating that quality of coaching out there that's
Yeah.
going to really make it so that more people who feel this work is really what they're called to do have the ability to make a living from it.
Mm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is when we come back to like, why are you a coach? I don't think that's an accident. I think, yes, this work sometimes finds us, we find it, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that meeting point and the sense of resonance with it, for
Mm-hmm.
me, that feels like a very real thing. Like I know in my bones, I was going to do something like this,
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
me
think
too.
most of the people listening would be like, yeah, like just the experience of being with a client and flowing into that conversation. It's kind of
Mm-hmm.
magical.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things I've seen happen over the last decade or so is that our maturity as practitioners is also influencing our clients. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
I'm now seeing clients who I worked with maybe 5-10 years ago who are kind of coming back to say, hey, I'm at a different stage in my life, would love to touch base and
Yeah.
Yeah.
can we chat? And it is like a singular joy for me to hear someone say, do you remember when you showed me how to do that? And I still do that. And it's so supportive. And I just think as more and more humans feel resourced and
Yeah.
really come back to themselves, what matters to me? What do I value? What's my discernment about this situation? Where do I want to put a bit of boundary around my time or my energy with this relationship? The more that we can all do that in ways that don't, blame and project, the healthier our whole species will become. And I know that sounds a bit grand, but it is just one person at a time. It's one conversation at a time. That's how that change happens. We're all quite impatient for something to shift. We can see how wounding we are to each other. I definitely think that coaching is part of the solution,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I remain ever hopeful that, coaches who are quite thoughtful and reflective and come from that value-led place will have the greatest impact on the world that we want to all live in. Yeah.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
times that it works best for me are when I let the love drive me forward. I love this work, and also I am committed to this work. I'm devoted to this work. And I think
Mm.
that's important too. Like, I don't know what the hell it's going to look like or what form. I hold all of that really loosely these days, to your point, Sass, but I am 100% devoted to this work. And that's, that's where things really start to open up for me.
Yeah. Well, I love that
Yeah.
you're both talking relationship and love and coming from that place, because so, we're talking about money today. And I, if I tell my clients this all the time, that because I think it's so interesting. The word money comes from the name of the Roman goddess Moneta. And Moneta was the goddess of the temple in which the Romans minted their coins. And I think you guys are talking a little bit about what I might call the goddess energy, and how we've lost the goddess energy in money. And instead of realizing that the goddess energy, which is relational energy, which is the love energy, which is, that we've made money into a god in and of
Yes.
itself. So we
Yeah.
removed the goddess from the relational energy, and we've replaced it with turning money into a thing unto itself.
Yeah.
That we basically, are in a culture that almost worships it, you could say.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it has no inherent value.
Yeah.
It is representative of value.
Yeah. And it's supposed to represent that relational energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
So you,
That's,
Leanne, to bring in some ancient goddess wisdom.
I know. I love it.
But it's just, I don't know. I mean, it's when I learned that from my mentor. And when my mentor told me that, it was kind of like, yeah, I've never thought about where that word money comes from. It's just kind of one of those, like, it
Yeah.
just is. And then when I
Yeah.
found out it was actually the name of a goddess, it was like yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah.
This is such a lush conversation. I hope folks listening have found this helpful and maybe just started to perhaps spark a conversation with yourself around, how do you want to run your business? Where do you want, that this is relational energy that we are living through, right? So how do you want that to be rewarded? It's very much about, what the relationship looks like, the expression that feels the most useful to you and the most exciting to you. That's what's going to bring the moolah in, right? So starting from there rather than the money is we think a better place to begin. Yeah. So
Nice.
good to be with you, OGs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this
Fun.
conversation. Yeah, it was great.
Thanks, everyone.